Good evening, everyone. How's the microphone? Going well? Welcome to our first guest artist lecture and our first guest artist exhibit here at the Ylvisaker Fine Arts Center. This is a series of events that we do throughout the school year for the benefit especially of our Bethany students and community. And we welcome any guests who are here with us. Our first artist comes from quite a distance. John Bergmeier has a camper out in the parking lot. He and his wife Carla are camping out at Minneopa Falls for the week. Leaving in the morning, they arrived early this week, unpacked artwork, and have also been kind of integrated in the art department throughout the week. John's been making prints and teaching some transfer methods, and just he's been in the cafeteria. He's been kind of part of Bethany for the better part of this week. I love that scenario. The work that we see here, this is conceived of as a retrospective exhibit, and John's going to explain that. You see that up on the title slide here. So what we're seeing is a selection of work from various stages in John's career as, I think he describes himself primarily as a printmaker, but you'll see that that gets stretched in different directions. My advice about John's work is that you approach it with curiosity. I believe that his work offers questions maybe as much or more than it offers answers. And that's a curious stance. It's an interesting stance to approach an image when we today are so used to making a snap judgment about an image. So many things like a billboard or an Instagram image or an ad are made to process in seconds. We make a decision. Do we like it? Do we get it? Do we understand it? Immediately. This work doesn't operate that way. You need to engage with it, and you need to slow down. You need to spend time, just as he has. There's a lot of process involved. There's a lot of combination involved. And you will reap rewards by inquiring, by looking and trying to understand what might be suggested by the work. Please welcome with me Jonathan Bergmeier.
Thank you. Nobody ever calls me Jonathan, but I don't. It's okay. Just to touch on that, what you were talking before, can you hear me okay? Is the mic all right? Okay, because I don't really, if I don't have to hold it, it's better, because I tend to do this. I love being on your campus here. This has been amazing. And the chapel services, what a wonderful way to start the day. Reminds me when I went to undergrad school at Hastings College in Nebraska. Presbyterian school, I didn't really fit in because I was Wells, but I didn't go there for the Presbyterian aspect of it. But they had chapel every morning too. I never went. I never went to one of them. My buddies and I went out duck hunting more and skipped some German classes. And that's part of the reason why I'm part of that Prodigal Son series back there. That's me. That's the prodigal part. But anyway, I do love this campus. I love being part of it, and what I've seen, I just love. And learning more a little bit about the ELS. I am Wells. I'm a Wells layman. I've served in a number of different capacities on church councils and different committees, outreach, evangelism. I'm currently an elder on our council, our Wells Church in Grace Lutheran in Charlotte, North Carolina. So thank you for that, Jason, the nice introduction, because then I don't have to really explain much more than, right? But no, that's awesome. And it's great for me that somebody gets kind of the concept, because a lot of times I end up working in a vacuum and I'm just creating and making things that seem really relevant and important for me. And I get good feedback. I get into shows and things like that, which is great reinforcement. But it's great when people kind of get it, and I appreciate that. To that point, if you're like Jason said, if you came tonight expecting lots of answers about my artwork, you may be going home disappointed, slightly disappointed, because even I don't have all the answers with some of these pieces. For me, they're very meaningful because I made them. I spent a lot of time with them. I look at them and enjoy them, meditate and think about things, so they're enjoyable for me. I hope you find them enjoyable too. My plan tonight is to kind of show you some of the things that have influenced me in my life. I'll show you some of the aspects of my career work, which is different than the creative work. And my hope is that in your knowledge of my background and my influences, that when you see some of the things, like my personal iconography that I use, and you'll see repeated in some of the pieces, that it'll make sense without me actually explaining to you exactly what it is. That's my hope, and also I know that I'm in an educational environment. So if I have an opportunity to share with students, the path that I've gone on, the duality of my creative work and my work, even the pieces that are 30 years old compared to pieces that are maybe 3 weeks old, I think that's all really valuable. I mean, I hope it is, and I hope that you'll enjoy that path with me as well. Let's see. Let's just go ahead and get started, because I know this hour is going to go really fast. I am showing this slide. I hope you can see it. This is a printmaker from the 1500s named Hans Bergmeier. And I'm going to be very honest with you that I do not know if I'm related to him or not. I think the name similarity is more than a coincidence. I think there is a connection. He's German. Sort of a pretty well-known printmaker for that era, the early German Renaissance. Not as well known as Albert Dürer and some of the other ones, but he was a peer of Albert Dürer. And I don't know, I find that really interesting. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this, but recently I read some articles about this idea of being a better ancestor, myself being a better ancestor for the people behind me that are coming in generations. I'm still fleshing that out, but I think that has something to do with what this is. I think there's something to be said about this idea of time and family, connections. I'm still working on that, but I think as we go through this, you'll maybe see a little bit more of this possibility with this. So, to start out with here, so I was 7 years old when this stamp came out, so I don't really remember much about it, but I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. I was the youngest of four boys. We ran out of tractors, so when I was young, my three brothers did most of the farming until I was probably 12 or 13, and then I spent a lot of time on a tractor. My parents really weren't highly educated. My dad went through the 8th grade. My mom graduated from high school. I didn't grow up in an artistic environment. We really didn't know anything about art. My parents were farmers, right? My exposure to the arts were through high school. I had some great high school teachers that encouraged me. I think my parents encouraged me to the point that they knew that they didn't know anything about art, but they knew that it probably had a better future for me than farming. And because, we had a family farm, but I had 3 older brothers. So I felt encouraged to go into art, but really didn't know what I was going to get into. I guess that lasted for quite a while until I went to college and the whole thing. But one of the things that I look back at is the time that I spent on the farm, with my grandmother specifically, and her sister, my Aunt Erna, great Aunt Erna. They would sit around in the house quilting, sewing all the time. So this was not a foreign thing for me to see these kinds of things happening. At the time, I didn't really understand it, but I knew that it was something that was kind of important for them. And as you can probably detect why I'm showing these, probably an early stage exposure to pattern development and the use of color, the use of fabric, the use of design to incorporate into quilts. This is actually a quilt that my church that I grew up, well, I was baptized in, a country church, Emmaus Church near Beatrice, Nebraska. The willing workers made this quilt in 1939, and my grandmother's name is stitched on here someplace. And actually, somehow I received this through the generations, and I donated it to the museum there in Beatrice. So hopefully they're taking good care of it. But and without going into a lot of the whole idea of quilts, but I think you're probably aware of how each one, especially here, each one of these women contributed their little square, right? And a lot of times what happens with quilts is that they do represent the family tradition, family involvement. Those fabrics are tied to the clothing possibly that they wore at some time until it became worn out, and then they would put it into a quilt. I love that whole idea. And I think that was kind of a big thing for me. I didn't know it at the time, but just being exposed to that idea and the visuals of that, looking back now, I can see that there's some connections to that. Saturday nights with my mom, pasting S&H green stamps. Everybody knows S&H green stamps? Yes? No? No? Okay, no. Okay. Well, you used to, I don't think you can't do them anymore. I don't think they make them, but you used to save them and you made a big box or book of them, and then you could turn it in for a toaster or something, right? So that's what my mom and I would do on Saturday nights, plus this guy. Everybody knows who this guy is, right? So, yeah, that was, we knew how to live it up on the farm, right? Yeah, so that was pretty much it. I mean, it was, and I'm not sure how this is, I don't know how that's influenced me, but maybe my love for music. I still love that kind of music, sort of, but, and then Sunday mornings was church and this guy. Who knows this guy? Yeah, Davy and Goliath, right? And I used this recently I gave a presentation at the Wells Worship Conference. I don't know if anybody attended that. You guys did. Did you? Were you a part of my presentation that I showed this? Or you might have, as you know, oh, okay. My presentation was on defense of the unique and the unique methods of sharing the gospel. Actually had a picture of Jason's sand drawings too as part of that presentation. But claymation, animation, this is mid-60s, late 60s. ELCA church sponsored this. It took me a long time before I realized that the theme song was A Mighty Fortress is Our God. But anyway, another unique way of sharing the gospel, which was every Sunday morning while we were waiting for Mom to get ready to go to church. My dad left us in heaven for almost 40 years now. And I like these pictures. As I was gathering these pictures, this is my dad. I apologize, it's kind of blurry. But the thing I like about this, there's a lot of things I like about this, but my dad was a farmer, but he also made things. If something needed to be made on the farm, he made it. He also did well drilling. So this is his well drilling machine. When I was a teenager, I was in awe that my dad made this. I mean, I still am, but amazing machine. The reason I like this is because if you look, you'll notice that there's this arm there where a mirror should be going. This is him putting the mirror on. And I don't know how that happened, that I happened to have that photo of him doing that. But certainly, I think this is an indicator to me as looking back. My dad was a very hardworking man, and that's never left me, I think. My appreciation for hard work, determination, knowing the value of a good nap. Yeah, we would work in the fields early in the morning, come home for lunch, take a nap for half an hour, and then go back out in the fields until dark. And that was our summers. But my dad, like I said, would build if something needed to be made, if an engine needed to be rebuilt, he would do it. Right? He would never take anything to the store to get made. My grandmother also loved magazines, and I guess it sounds like I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, and I guess in retrospect I did, while everybody else was busy on the farm when I was young. And so while I'm at my grandmother's house looking at magazines, so these were around. These were part of my everyday life, right? Looking at these kinds of images, which were kind of fascinating to me at the point at that time. The illustration aspect of it, which I probably didn't grasp as much as I should have at the time, but just acknowledging now the fact that some of these illustrations and photographs are just incredible, incredibly well done. But these were around me all the time. As were these kinds of kids' things, the toys, the card games, the ephemeral type things that we would have. I mentioned my dad working on engines and things, and there were manuals everywhere. And for whatever reason, for me, very visual. I would love looking through these, and I should have a slide of this too. One of them would be they would show the front ends of each year, like all the Ford Mercurys or something. They would have the 62, 63, 64. We would have those memorized as kids, just the diagrams like these. And of course, everything, the Christian imagery associated with the church. I don't have any slides of stained glass, but these sorts of images from Sunday school and paraphernalia for like church fans were part of our life, right, growing up. Just looking at this now is really interesting. I have a piece over here. It's kind of based on Joseph, Mary's husband, father of Jesus. It's just, there's so much that's so intriguing to me. Like, he's so old here, right? And there's so much we don't know about Joseph, right? The Bible doesn't tell us a lot about Joseph, but I find this really interesting looking at that, how old he looks. We also had lots of photographs around, lots of family photographs. And that was, I shouldn't say lots, but I think the ones that we had, I would see and look at repeatedly over and over again. And I love these kinds of things. We would have these kinds of things around too. So remember, this predates Photoshop, right? So they used to have a lot of fun back in the 30s and 40s, right? Where they would do these kinds of photographs. And that's a real photograph, right, from Nebraska. I don't know if you've heard the stories, but we grow cows big there. And the corn's really big. You guys in Minnesota think you got something, but then stuff like this, just fun, photos type stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that I grew up with, and I never forgot about. And it's stuff that I still have some of these things that I look at and enjoy. Shifting gears a little bit. When I was in graduate school, we made a field trip. We had a field trip to Kansas City. I went to graduate school at Wichita State in Kansas. We had a field trip to the Nelson Museum in Kansas City. And I remember this because it made such an impact on me. When I saw these reliquaries, I've never seen them before. I didn't even know what they were at the time. But, and I had at that point, even a pretty good grasp of the Christian faith, and it was important to me and everything. I wasn't a prodigal son yet at that point, or anymore. But I saw these, and I'm just like amazed. Like, this is something that's so in your face Christian, but it's so decorative. It's so beautiful and amazing for me and wonderful. And the more I looked into this, there's so many different versions of this, of these types of containers. Um, Part of it's difficult to totally embrace the whole concept of these, because the Roman Catholic Church, reveres the relics, right? Typically they would contain bones of saints and things like that, and proposed that you could have miracles by just touching and seeing these things. But aside from that part, I don't buy into that, but the decorative part of it, I think, is what's really grown on me and drawn me into the different aspects of this, and continues today. And you see that if you saw some of the pieces back there, directly influenced by these medieval period reliquaries, and some are more elaborate than others. And I think the other part of it is too, is that if you're even looking at these, they're not perfect. They're not pristine. There's some aspects of them that are just, a little bit, the angle's off. You can see that one there, the leg's off a little bit. And that's my excuse when I make them, that they're not perfect. But and even the pyx container for the vessel for the bread for communion. That's the other part of this, the liturgical objects. This is more of a recent thing that I've gotten into, that I'm exploring with my pieces back there that you see. The mystery surrounding these types of vessels, I just love. I love the shapes. They're very unique, very purposeful, and direct. I think for me, I'm embracing the mystery of these. And we know as Lutheran Christians, the mysteries are abounding, right, with our faith in general, but especially with liturgical objects like this, where we believe that Christ's body is in the bread and Christ's blood is in the wine, right? How can that be? That doesn't make sense, right? But it's the mystery, and I'm enjoying that, and in a way, kind of doubling down on that mystery, to try to enhance it maybe, and then explore it even further. But some of these things are beautiful. The Russian icons, the book covers. I love all these kinds of things. Hymn boards. That's a whole nother presentation that I could give. And I don't know if you've seen. I shouldn't probably go this way, but I will real quick. My church just did a remodel, and one of the things that got taken off the wall were the hymn boards, and I was very upset about it. I'm not bitter. I just haven't gotten over it yet, but I just think that it's something that really reinforces the Lutheran heritage of music, right? Even if you didn't put up the numbers or anything like that, just the fact that you've got the hymns there, you've got an order, you're supporting the musical heritage of the Lutheran faith, and again, I guess I should say too, because that makes sense, I have used that concept of hymns in some of my pieces as well. So, but again, some other types of liturgical objects that just I find very fascinating, and still do that, and incorporate that into my mindset when I'm making the sculptural pieces back there. So some of the artists that I have enjoyed and admire, have been sort of influenced by, and this is part of the educational thing. I just I'm not going to assume that everybody knows some of these artists, so it pleases me that I can share these artists with you. But for me, it's not something that I wanted to emulate and copy, but more the fact that I was making artwork sort of like some of these things prior to knowing some of these artists. But when I saw these artists, it was like, okay, I'm okay. It sort of validated what I was doing, right? So that's a good thing. Robert Rauschenberg, one of the pop artists from the 60s, 70s, 80s, he also a printmaker, started out doing a lot of painting. The combines that he would combine materials with colors and shapes and objects and images. Some of his famous ones would include icons from the 60s and 70s, using multiple images, colors. The pop artists, and I've got a few of them here, really embrace that whole concept of using social commentary and exploring that, commenting with irony, humor, and I think that's part of it that I like too. But even the fact that they used a lot of images that were popular at that time to tell a story, basically. This is probably my favorite pop artist, maybe even more than Robert Rauschenberg. Peter Blake, probably one of the pop artists that nobody's ever heard of, but he's from England and one of my favorites. And the last slide I have of his, it'll click for you who he is if you don't know who he is already. He did these kinds of things where he would portray people and tell you a little bit more about those people by the things like the buttons on his jacket, right, on their jackets. Tell you what club they were in, what kind of things they like to do with their lives. He also did these. So these are the tattooed ladies. And you're going to see probably more tattooed lady things tonight than you'll ever want to, probably. But I love this idea and this concept where, and I'll confess right now, I do not have a tattoo at all, ever, anywhere. But I love the idea that you're expressing something about yourself by what you've got on your skin. And it's really hard. My wife hates tattoos. And my daughters have tattoos, so that's kind of been a point of contention. But visually, for this kind of thing, I love the idea of actually showing things, connections, images associated with a person's life this way. And a nice story about this Peter Blake's tattooed lady. It's in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And for work one time, it's been probably 20 years ago, I was in London, went to the V&A. It wasn't on display. I asked the people, is it possible that I could go see this? And they said, oh, yeah, come on in. So they took me into the room, they brought it out, and I actually got to see this piece. It was like one of the highlights of my life, but it was amazing. And I still love this piece a lot, and you'll be able to tell that it influenced me a lot. So this is Peter Blake's, one of his works. So everybody knows that, right? It's the Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover. Claes Oldenburg, another pop artist that I really like. It's a funny picture of him there with that, but we're used to seeing these kinds of images of his sculptures. This one's just down the road, right, up in Minneapolis. Again, that whole idea of irony, making things larger than life, just to kind of show off and say, isn't this great? If you really like it as it's small, let's make it really big. And it's like, how big can we make it? But a lot of irony and humor with Claes Oldenburg's work. Jasper Johns, printmaker. I saw this print for 4 years when I went to undergrad school. We had a copy of it, and I've always loved it. It's very simple in some ways, but very direct in another way. Another one of his pieces, too. There's a number of artists that are similar style, like Larry Rivers is kind of into this kind of abstract portrayal of images and use of text and things. I like Jasper Johns maybe a little bit more because it seems like he's a little bit more subdued with his color use. Another current artist that I like a lot, William Kentridge, South Africa, known primarily for his charcoal drawings, but he also does a lot of movies, videos, and a lot of experimentation with videos. This is one of the pieces that he's working on. And I was joking with Jason the other day, one of the questions that a lot of people ask about William Kentridge is when he works with charcoal and black paints, how does he keep his white shirt white? Because that's kind of his trademark. He always wears a white shirt, just like that. But he's pretty good. And he uses a lot of found imagery to combine the paintings and drawings with. And I hope this is going to work. I think I need to.
When I was 3 years old, I wanted to be an elephant. I failed at that. When I was 15, I wanted to become a conductor of orchestras. But then I was told that to be a conductor, you had to be able to read music. So I was reduced to being an artist. One of the hard things to realize is the age of who one is, of what your imagination can produce, of what all the habits of your arm and eye and muscles are. So you start thinking into a picture of the whole universe, but you end up with a coffee pot.
I realize the audio was a little hard there at the end, but basically he's talking about you work really hard to create something big as the universe, then you end up doing a self-portrait of yourself as a coffee pot. So, and why do I show that? I mean, I love, I tend to not take myself so serious, and I love that. But also William Kentridge he works really, really hard at his craft, and that's another thing that really I really admire. And visually, his work is dynamite as well. Swoon's another artist that when you can be reduced to and known as one name, you've kind of made it, I guess. But she is a wonderful young woman who's tied mostly to printmaking. Does these amazingly huge, big woodcuts, cuts out pieces of paper, like some of the stuff here this is all cut out paper. This is all cut out, so these are voids that are cut out of the paper. And these are huge pieces. I mean, that's probably 10 feet tall. Oops, sorry, go back this way. Another one very huge, but just kind of that incorporation of a lot of different materials and colors. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet her briefly at a printmaking conference, and she's just a dynamite person. Love her work. Another sculptor that I really, really like, Marc de Souvreau. I think a lot of this has to do with, ties back into when my dad used to make things out of iron. But I love Marc de Souvreau's work, and this is actually at the Storm King Art Center in New York. If you ever have a chance to go to the Storm King Art Center, Sculpture Park in New York, please go. They've got a lot of his pieces, but a lot of other really, really beautiful outdoor sculpture pieces. And who wouldn't love some guy like that, right? I mean, it's like he's going to bring zucchini over, right? But I also love this kind of image of him too, because that's what I saw so many things early on that just drove me to him, that he's right on this stuff. He's welding, he's drilling holes, and the sweat's just dripping off of him, like my dad. So I love his work, and it's not easy either, right? It's like you look at it. I think the best way to think about it is that if you look at simple line drawings that have been made huge, right, and made out of steel, and some of these actually move according to the wind and the elements and things. But just I really love his work as well. And again, probably more so the fact that they are enormous. He works really hard, and they're fun to look at. Another thing that getting away from the visual artist, but more into the music, inspires me a lot. Things are changing a little bit as I get older, but I still love Radiohead, so don't get that wrong. But I listen to music a lot when I work, when I make artwork, and Radiohead is one band that I really, really like because of the sound quality, the layers in their music. It's so complex, but it's still very beautiful, I think. Some of them can be a little bit really industrial and hard to listen to, but mostly they're very melodic, and harmony is just beautiful work. Very different. Tom Waits is another one of my favorite singer-songwriters. His early work, if you're going to listen to Tom Waits, listen to the early stuff. The later stuff is just a little bit really rough. But I don't know if you know Tom Waits. Maybe some of you do. I see some heads nodding. He wrote Old 55 that the Eagles made famous. But love his storytelling. Man, oh man, can he tell stories. Another one, that singer-songwriter that could tell stories, John Prine. I see what he said. In my songs, I try to look through someone else's eyes, and I want to give the audience a feeling more than a message. And if you know John Prine's work, he's a wonderful storyteller. Music's very good. This guy too, he's not so bad. He tells pretty good stories and has some pretty good music too. But if I'm being very honest, and I will, I'm honest with you guys. I'm not very polished, but I'm very sincere. I love church music. I love hymns, and this is something that inspires me. I talked about the hymn boards being something visually that I think ties into that Lutheran musical heritage. But I love 4-part harmonies. I love singing the bass line on songs that I can know and learn. But even just the texts themselves are very inspiring to me and useful for me as I'm putting things together. And as you look at some of the pieces here in this show, you'll see that I lean on some hymns a lot. In addition to God's word, I oftentimes will leave Sunday morning services with lots of notes in my bulletin, right, where I'm like something connected with me from a sermon or a reading, something that I hadn't thought of before, something in a hymn possibly. It really is a big influence in some of my work, and the musical part of that, God's word, fits into that really, really strongly too. And you'll see that in a lot of my pieces where I actually have some verses, and it also include a lot of Bible verses as well, Bible stories. One thing that I should say, I didn't include it as an artist. I had it in my presentation at the Wells Conference when I talked about defense of the unique, was Ezekiel. And I guess I do have some drawings that I did later on, but Ezekiel is I consider him to be one of the first performance artists, because he did what God told him to do, right? And he just acted it out, and that was his way of preaching and teaching the people. I could talk a lot about Ezekiel, but I won't. For the sake of keep going here. Yeah, okay. So, as part of my introduction, I should have said, as Jason mentioned, I do consider myself a printmaker / mixed media artist, but I have to add on to that color materials and finishes designer, CMF designer. You may or may not know what that means. I'm going to explain that. That's why I'm here. I'm going to explain that to you. But I think this has been the career path that I've been on for 30 plus years. And I love the work that I do. And basically, it's like this. It's these types of finishes that are applied to products. That's, in a nutshell, CMF design is concerned about the color of the materials of the products, the patterns, the decorative finishes, high gloss, low gloss, all these kinds of factors onto a product surface. And I know you're thinking, wow, I didn't know anybody did that. Right? Am I right? All right. Okay. No, but that's what my career has been, is applications of these kinds of patterns and materials, specifically for automotive applications, mostly interior applications. So you can see some of these parts here. Another part of this work that I do that I find very enjoyable is every year my company comes out with the color of the year. And I know it's funny because everybody does that and they're never the same color. But the company I work for does do a lot of interior house paint in Europe. We're one of the largest paint manufacturers in the world. The part of work that I do for it is mostly this kind of application of film for plastic parts. This is the current color of the year. We call it Sweet Embrace. And part of what I do for this is I research some of this, I apply it to our products, but I give these presentations to car companies. So I've made presentations to almost all the global automotive manufacturers and into their design studios, at least once a year when we present these color of the year type things to them, which is really fun for me. It's nerve-wracking, maybe a little bit more than tonight is for me, but it's always great. Great people work on these types of products. Another thing that recently has interested me too, and this is maybe more aligned with the word material, is that there's a lot of interest right now in sustainability and products that are sustainable and have a green story that don't contribute to the carbon footprint, all these types of things. We've taken my design team, I manage a design team that works on this stuff. We've taken it upon ourselves to do a lot of exploration into these materials, and it's been so much fun. This is one example of something. I don't know how this is going to work, but they actually make these ceramic type materials out of eggshells. And I'm like, wow, where did they get all these eggshells from? But then you think about eggs and how fragile they are in the process. They're probably breaking a lot of them, I guess, but they retain the beauty of it. And that's the thing that we're working with is, as we're working with these materials, we want to keep the sustainability factor of the materials evident. And, because if we just put a color over the top of and say that it's recycled plastic, that's great, but can we do something more than that? Can we make it more meaningful for a consumer? And that's what we really are striving for, and that's a fun part of my job. Playing around with haptic surfaces, that there's actual sensory touch to the surface of the materials. We play around with a lot of materials in our lab. We do screen printing and gravure printing to create these patterns and designs. And they're primarily all for automotive applications. So the wood grains that everybody hates, made out of plastic, we try really hard to make them look good, but God did a really great job. So it's hard to take over what he did. Here you can see kind of what, like the gloss, the pattern is made with a coating or pattern that's printed with a high gloss that's different than the satin gloss behind it. So these are the kinds of things that I do for my work. Maybe in some ways may seem very distant, but for me, the two have worked out really well throughout my whole career and supported each aspect of my work. I'm free to do a lot more things with this art materials and expressive things that I want to do creatively with my artwork. But I find there's a lot of this that I can take and apply to that, and vice versa. Some of the things that I'm working on for that, I can apply to this, and it's worked out great for me. I can't think of anything better, for me personally, because I'm still printing even when I'm doing these kinds of things. I'm printing samples. I'm learning things. I'm curious. What about this? What about this? And I apply that with this too. So it's worked out really great for me. And if there's any students here that are interested in CMF design, please let me know. It's a great career. So, and a lot of need for good designers. Typically, people that go into that don't go the route that I did, but a lot of them come through fashion design, product design. Trying to think. Graphic design is certainly part of that as well. I also do a lot of logos on the side. I love making logos. I don't really love working with churches to do the logos, especially if there's like a committee of like more than 2 people. It's really difficult for me sometimes because I'm like, okay, but sometimes they're really great. Like, well, if you like it, I like it. Okay, perfect. So you can see some of the things I do. I did a lot of churches. I did the Wartburg project, which was really fun because I can look at the hymnals and I see my logo in those. But also like other companies and things too. So I'm going to speed things up here a little bit because I know we're crunching time. Also spent some time doing graphic design, industrial graphic design. So I worked for this design consultant firm that worked primarily and did work for John Deere. And it was so cool working on things because I was the only one really working on this kind of stuff that actually spent time on a tractor. So, I mean, I don't know really if that had anything to do with anything, but I could say that anyway. But it was fun. I really liked doing this kind of stuff, and they used a lot of my designs for some of their products. So, again, I just want to quickly show you some of the things that I did early on and kind of go to where I'm at now, just so you can kind of get an idea of the progression. Did a lot of stuff like this, realistic type things, did a lot of tractors. This was some things from undergrad. One of my first screen prints when I was trying to figure out how to even do this screen printing thing. Did a lot of drawing. I spent a lot of time drawing. And even when I was a kid, I told you my parents, my mom mostly was very supportive of me. I guess saw some talent in me. She would give me a roll of butcher paper, right, and just say, here, draw on that. And I would. And so I really like drawing. I don't do as much as I should and could, but I did a lot. These are early 80s types of things. And even then, I was starting this idea of combining images, putting them together, trying to tell a story, just by having the images together to tell a story. But this was all drawn, hand-drawn. Again, more tractors, but I still love tractors. Some of the old farmhouses, pen and ink. Another early screen print. I think I got a B on this one. Graduate school did a lot of this. So you're going to see a lot of this is what I was saying. Theme tattooed farmer. My idea with these was these old ladies. And I don't mean that in a bad way. And that they would have these secrets and you know, I don't know. I'll let some of the images tell the story. But I did a lot of prints. This one was really, it may not look so complicated, but this is a 4-plate intaglio print that has to register in. And it was copper plates, a lot of work, but really, really cool. The idea here, you can look back at the Peter Blake tattooed lady. These ladies have clothes on, but the idea is having like on their clothes the same kind of idea where they've got the quilting pattern with images from their lives. Again, here's more. This is a big woodcut, like 4 plates, 3 foot by 4 foot, that go into the block. I was cutting these things out of masonite with a Dremel tool, and it was so much fun. There was stuff everywhere. It was crazy, but a lot of fun. Another one, just it really pushed that theme as much as I could, and in different medias. So this in graduate school, I was doing a lot of things with litho, intaglio, screen printing. These are lithos. Kind of this idea of the guy close to where I grew up was where the vice grip factory was at in Nebraska, and there's rumors that one of my ancestors was mad at Mr. Peterson because he stole his idea to make the vice grip. I don't know if it's true or not, but the factory was there. My idea here was this: is that the guy worked at the factory, and she kept all the love letters in the Prince Albert cans. So as simple as that, but it gets much more complex when you start reading some of the stories and things that I've written on another version of that as well. The whole idea of kind of keeping secrets in tobacco cans. And the reason, I guess I should say tobacco cans, my next door neighbor, Harry Lotman, was a throwback. I don't think you see this anymore, but he always had coveralls, and he had the Prince Albert, the velvet can tucked in right here. And he would always roll his own cigarettes, which I don't think you see that anymore, not legally. But we would have these cans like all over the place. And you can see that even in some of these pieces over here where I still use that idea of the velvet tobacco cans as a container for secrets, I think, in a way. I don't know. I like that because it's seems like it's fitting, and it fits into the iconography a little bit for what I want to do. But also some things like this with candy wrappers, I think is. So some of these are, I'm just going to roll through some of these early prints. This was based on my dad, some images from him and his life. Combinations of collage, collage print, lithoprint. These are mostly transfers. I showed the kids the other day how to transfer some of these images, added in drawing. These are some of the details on those. I did mention Ezekiel earlier, and I did do some charcoal drawings based on Ezekiel and some of the things that God commanded him to do as part of his prophesying and preaching and teaching. I still love doing charcoal drawings like this. I just don't do them very often because they take a lot of time right there. Yeah, but I do love doing those charcoal drawings. In lino cuts, these are based on Cain and Abel, the story of Cain and Abel, and I do that a lot. I'll find a story, a Bible story, and embellish it. Not that I'm adding to it. No lightning strike, but I'm interested in the added portion of the story that the Bible doesn't tell us. Okay, some things behind the scenes, and I don't know if I have an example of this, but I'm thinking of like Jephthah's daughter that was dead and became alive again. Jesus raised her back to life. I did some pieces on that, like what that would have been like for her. Seeing heaven for, I don't know how long she was dead, but like a day, and then having to come back to earth, and then having to deal with, stinky boys, and, having to wash dishes and all this stuff. And I'm just like, that's crazy. I mean, so anyway, those kinds of things I think about, like the behind the scenes things that happen in stories. This is a representation of us as Christians being distracted when we're trying to listen to God's word, and that happens a lot. One way that I think might help explain some of the things and why I do some of the things I do. This is my daughter's refrigerator. She always hates it when I show this, but we do this. Unless, like, my wife doesn't like to put anything on the refrigerator, but we do this, right? We put important things on our refrigerator. So we've got a notebook here, notepad here to write down things. When you get things in the mail, we stick them up here with magnets. We've got coupons, these people that you love, new things. And what typically happens, right, is that the newest stuff gets put on top. And the old stuff kind of gets pushed back, right? It kind of gets, it's a layer underneath to the point where you don't even know. I mean, how do you know what's underneath all this stuff? You see little hints here, but everything that's recent gets put on the top. And I love that idea of showing time, the passage of time by doing that. You'll see that in my work. I don't do a lot of sketching for preliminary type works for my prints. I do a lot of this cut and paste. And you can see these kind of compositions I put together with the images that I collect. I collect a lot of images like this. I go through like old dictionaries, encyclopedias, manuals, school books, and I put these things together like this to create a screen that I can use for screen printing. And if you look closely at these, you'll see those in some of these prints because I use these screens for a lot of my prints. This one is going to be coming up, and I'll try to point it out to you when we get to it. But this is the way that I compose my pieces. Much like a musician composes using notes and refrains and things like that, I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing with this. I'm composing these images in a way that seems very has a rhythm, repetition. Some things are strong, some things are soft. A couple pieces that I did based off of tombstone rubbings. These were actually done from a cemetery here in western Minnesota. I forget the name of the town. It's over by Lake Carlos on the western side. Spent an afternoon rubbing some of the tombstones and then incorporating that into my prints. And I loved that. It was really fun. Reinforcing that idea of the remember death, but don't fear death as Christians. This is the one I was talking about. You might remember some of the images from that composition I had before. I donated this piece to a women's shelter because I love the idea of like a cage being opened up and being free, which I think is very appropriate for that. Some of my newer things, again, kind of just a lot of collaging. I'll take screen prints and put things together to create some stories and some connections. This is one from the Prodigal Son series back there. I encourage you to take a look at that. Like Jason said, they're not easy. They're pretty dense. A lot of my work is very dense and heavy, but these are in sequence 1 through 5, retelling the story of the prodigal son, including myself as both the father and the son, having 3 daughters. Yeah, I'm the father too. That was a really fun series for me. Also doing things like this, playing around with turning these objects so that they're actually on the wall, playing with the idea of like an old telephone, a timeless type of receiver where you actually can speak and hear things through, maybe more aligned with heavenly conversations, but same kind of idea of incorporating the imagery that I use and found materials. I love working with pieces of metal and things that I can find around. It's very important for me to work with materials, even at this. And we're almost done, so hang on. We're almost done. Yeah, I know it's 8 o'clock. Here we go. So these are some of the newer pieces, and you can see those mostly over there. I love the fact that I found this roll of wedding aisle paper at Hobby Lobby about 2 years ago. It's the stuff, it comes on a roll and you roll it down the middle of the aisle at the church, then they walk on it. It was an amazing thing for me because it's very decorative. You can see it's very transparent or translucent because it has some pattern into it, but it obscures what's underneath it slightly, but you can still see some things through it. Even like the face of the upper right-hand corner, is from one of my earlier other prints that I've placed this on top of. So it's like that idea of veiling, I think, is really important to me, the layering. And these are kind of a new direction for me too, in the fact that I like the open space with this. It's not schizophrenic where it's like everything, every square inch is full of something. I've got a lot of empty space here. And I think as I'm getting older, I need that. I find myself really needing to step back and calm down, slow down, because I just, I'm not the man I used to be. But life is hard enough, right? Life can get really confusing, and it's because of that what we make it sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming. So for me, I like the fact that I'm kind of subduing some of these things and bringing more focus on certain aspects of the compositions. Having said that, these are some of my newest pieces too, but still love playing with the combination of patterns. These were made for the anniversary of the Lutheran first hymn book, release of Luther's hymns. What, 500 years ago, I think it was. So these two pieces are part of that remembrance of the hymns for that. With that, I'm going to stop. Before I close here, I do want to again thank Jason, the school. You guys are amazing. Made me feel so important. But welcome, which was great. I also want to give a thanks to my wife. She's in the back. She's been. She's my supportive partner. She made this exhibit happen too. So, having said that, I'm going to stop talking, take a drink of water, and I encourage you to ask me any questions. Okay? Go ahead.
You said I'm not very polished, but I'm sincere. You were talking about speaking, but would you say that translates into your artwork too? Is that?
I think I feel like the work that I do is very sincere, and it's me. I mean, and that's part of me, and I think a true artist can't help but portray themselves in their artwork. And I don't want to get away from that, and that's part of that sincerity and honesty, I think, that I strive for with my work. I don't try to be Robert Rauschenberg or Peter Blake or anybody else. I know that there's certain niches in faith-based art that my work does not fit into, right? And I'm well aware of that, and I think that actually drives me to fill a different niche. I don't pretend to be part of a representational, picture of Christ on a cross or Jesus holding the lamb, things like that. I mean, that's great. That's out there, and people do that, and it's wonderful. But for me, I want to do stuff like this that isn't getting done, that nobody else is seeing. And again, I did say earlier that I did spend some time with outreach committees, and that's a big part of what drives me is that I exhibit a lot of shows, and I show this type of work in secular shows, and I feel really good about that. That if for me, that's a way that I can share the gospel in an environment that maybe wouldn't get the gospel. And we know that that's, the Holy Spirit works in mysterious ways and works despite what we do. We throw it out there and we leave it up to the Holy Spirit to work, right? And that's one of my real drivers with a lot of this work is that I feel like I'm doing something that's different than the normal Jesus pictures. I don't know what it is. I'm accomplishing that. I know that. But there's a reason why that too. I mean, that's me, sincerity, it's honest, but I think it's filling us a gap that maybe doesn't have that right now. Does that answer your question? Okay. Hi.
You spoke a little bit about
It is, isn't it? Because, but even with the tattoos, right? You could, I mean, I don't know. I've seen so many really bad tattoos. And okay, you're laughing because you have to, but they don't necessarily represent the person, right? I mean, sometimes maybe they do, but you know, and we as Christians know that we can't see what's in people's hearts. Only God can see that. But, so that maybe that's part of that, because tattoos. If I have a tattoo, it's what I want other people to see, right? Not necessarily really me, right? So maybe that's part of that. I don't know. That help maybe. I know it's kind of a thing, right? That probably needs more exploration on my part. But I find that really intriguing. That whole thing too. I mean, yeah. Good question. Thanks. Yes, sir. Okay. He was first.
You kind of briefly just showed a picture of a fan, and it calls it like the Lutheran fan, or is the church fan? Is that a thing that I should know about that there's fans around the churches?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not so much anymore, but I know it used to be. And especially in the South. I didn't mention this before. I grew up in Nebraska, as I said, but lived in Michigan for 20 years, and now I've been in North Carolina for almost 13 years. It was like moving to a different country, and I struggle with understanding when people talk sometimes. But that's a very big part of the Southern culture too. But I mean, even in Nebraska, the funeral homes would have advertising on church fans. So I'd be more surprised, interested to know your background than you didn't have in church fans. No, and having said that, I have church fans up to 50. So please take a look at those. Okay. Oh. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, that's why you everybody pointed.
Hi, from above. How can you tell when something is balanced to you? Because I know in this specific medium, I know myself personally, everything always feels very busy. And so how do you, as an artist, tell?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I tend to work very intuitively, and I think that's just a lot of the decisions that I make. You know, have taken a lot of experience and time. You know, my brother-in-law was grilling me yesterday about all these pieces. So actually, he prepared me for tonight, but he asked a lot of questions. He asked me how long would it take me to make one of these pieces, and I really wanted to say I'm 60, gonna be 64, so about 62 years probably. And in a way that's funny, but it's not, because that's part of the development process of growing as an artist, as a graphic designer, having that kind of eye of how things should look, and looking at a lot of different art, being exposed to a lot of different art, making a lot of art, a lot of trial and error. That's, I don't know how else to say that, but that it seems like that for me, that's what's helped me get to a point where I'm at now. And again, I don't make my art other than the logos and the commercial stuff, but this stuff here, I just make for myself. I don't have to make it for anybody else, which is, I mean, I'm not, in my mind, I'm not making art just for the sake of selling it, and don't want to get into a position where, you know, somebody's telling me I should use more blue here. I'll buy it if you put more blue in it. I don't want to do that either. But I think it's just an intuition that's grown over the years, and trial and error. It's part of my process. I think it's like a conversation that I have with my piece. It's usually a one-way conversation that it tells me, you know, as I'm working, I make decisions. We saw that when I was working upstairs there yesterday, right? That whole idea of, what if I do this? What if I do that? You know, and I've never had anybody tell me this before, but Jason told me yesterday, you don't know what you're doing.
But he also said, take this in the best way possible. So I did. But there's truth to that too, that a lot of times I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing it, right? I'm just putting things together, and I'm adding this, I'm doing that to see if it works. And it's part of the process that I really like, that I can experiment with that and try different things and learn better how to know what I'm doing. So, thanks.
Last one.
Okay.
Last question.
Oh, you want arm wrestle too?
Yeah, I'll just make this.
So in your artwork, there's a lot of imagery from your childhood and from like before your time. And earlier in your presentation, you were you said a phrase like being a better ancestor, right? How to be a better ancestor. How does that connect to using older imagery and like in your artwork?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I think I said that when I said that too, is that it's something that I'm starting to think more about more and more. I don't have any answers yet on that. I don't fear death. I don't think about leaving my mark on humanity. That's not a big thing for me. But I think on the other end of that is that I don't want to be just totally forgotten. I mean, but that's it's inevitable, right? I mean, how many of us know our great grandfather's middle name, or even knew them, or even anything about them, right? Because it doesn't take long, right? That life gets busy and crazy, and we forget things. So I think that's just what happens. But for me, the concept, the idea is kind of something that I want to explore more. I think it's worth doing, but I don't have any answers yet. Sorry. If you want to help me with that, that'd be great. You guys are really smart. I know. I hear you guys talking about your artwork. You guys are great. So let's let him. Unless you know it's really going to be bad in the heart.
Tipping in your professional background, I found that really intriguing. Can you just give insight into, do you see a strong need for visual artists?
Yeah. So, and maybe what you're thinking about too is AI and how things are maybe getting easier in some aspects like that. But for visual artists, yeah, I think so. I think we have to have that, right? And we have to have people that are thinking differently than us and are making different things than what we're used to seeing. People's personalities are so complex and diverse now, and we're being bombarded with so many things now that it's tough to know what's real and what's not, and what's important and what's not. And as Christians, I think we know what's important, and we value that, and we look forward to that, eternity in heaven. But it can get really confusing with everything else, the peripheral stuff that gets thrown at us, right? To stay on that path. And, I think visual artists can help with that, and we should do that. I mean, that's something that we have permission and are empowered to do. And I don't know how that manifests itself, and it depends on the personality of the artist. There's so many different ways that can happen, but I absolutely think that we need that more and more. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's I shudder to think of a world that we don't have, especially Christian or faith-based artists making art, and that can manifest its way this way, or in the chapel as part of the service, liturgical work, bulletin covers. There's so many ways that the graphic design and visual arts can mesh and support the Christian faith. So I hope we can keep doing that. Okay. Thank you very much.
I want to thank John for leadership in that realm that he just described. We have access for a short time to this man who's with us from across the country. At this point, let's have chairs kind of very carefully move their way back towards the elevator. Watch out for the artwork. And and thanks to Professor Ben Fogstead for beautifying the time.